It's your boy Norrin Rad 89 here, bringing you another video today. And for today's video, it's going to be kind of just a chill, laid-back, retrospective video, kind of going over the Burton era Batman films. So that's Batman 1989 and Batman Returns, two very highly influential films in my childhood and my teen years, and like just going into what I loved in cinema in terms of comic movies. These films were highly influential. So let's get on to this video. And of course, I would love to hear from all of you in the comments section. Share your list of your favorite moments from these films in the comments. So right off the bat, I was introduced to these films at a very young age, probably like my early age, like earliest memories were probably like 5 or 6. I probably watched them before that, but like 5 or 6 is my earliest memories of actually remembering them. I had the Batman Returns VHS, and that thing got a lot of wear down. Like, it's like the complete black cover, and it has like Batman, Penguin, Catwoman, like on top of each other, their faces, and says Batman Returns and stuff, and the tagline and everything. It was like completely wore down, like white on the edges, like ripping apart the whole case and everything. Like, that's just how much I watched and like was grabbing this and touching this VHS tape and all that kind of stuff. So both of these films, yeah, got a lot of watch value when I was younger, and they're two very highly stylized films. I could definitely understand somebody that's like, was born in maybe the early 2000s, like this whole era going into now, watching the Batman films in this time, they're not gonna hit that way that they did back in the day. You know what I mean? It's definitely films that, like I said, the Burton films, they're highly stylized. Some of the most characteristic Gotham settings you're ever gonna see, for real, like the production design on all these films was really great. And yes, Batman Returns is more darker in tone for sure, because you have the Penguin and Catwoman. But both of these films are kind of more of stories about Joker, the first film, and then the next one's more about Penguin and Catwoman. They're not really about Batman, these films, which is kind of crazy. Michael Keaton's there, but he's not a prominent character. He doesn't have any kind of character development or anything like that. Like, the villains definitely have more character development than he does in these films, which is kind of crazy to think about it. But I still love Burton because I think he was the perfect one to really bring that stylized way that was able to do almost a blend of the comics but movie version. Like, it's such a nice little blend because it does have some crazy characteristics of the comics, but it feels real too, like when you see the Batmobile or you see him using the gadgets and stuff like that. So I really did like that aspect, and I think he was the perfect director to really be the first person to bring a new version of Batman to the limelight, especially the late 80s going into the 90s. These were like the best versions, and like I said, Batman Returns, like Batman, both on VHS, they got a lot of rewatch value in my home. And another thing I really do enjoy about these films is, as I said, they really do highlight the villains and the rogue gallery of Batman, which is kind of cool because it makes the world so much more three-dimensional. Like I said, even though Batman doesn't necessarily have an arc in these films, yes, he does meet a love interest in the first film, but it's kind of like a one-night stand thing. And then there's Michelle Pfeiffer's, Catwoman in the second film, and they have like kind of an arc, but it's not really like a growth type thing for Michael Keaton's Bruce Wayne or Batman or anything like that. So it's like I said, they're much more focused on the villains, and I think that's cool because that's something different, especially when you come to the Batman world. You really want that because I think he has the most rich villains, like in terms of like just what you want to learn from and having stuff to dive into character development wise. He has the most rich content villains, I think, out of any superhero, Marvel, DC, and any kind of Vertigo, any kind of comic franchise you want to go to. I think Batman has clearly the best villains, and that's why it's so cool. These two early films, they really do highlight them, and it's like I said, it's kind of a negative and it's kind of a positive, like I said, because I really do love that aspect. But then I was like, oh man, when you watch him, Batman, he's not really like a prominent main character. Like, I think even in I think it's the first one. It's either the first one or the second one, but like he takes like a good minute to even like show up at a certain time as Bruce Wayne. I believe it's the first film. he does, it's like 35 minutes into the film where you actually see him as Bruce Wayne in the film. And as I said, you can tell, like, Batman, he's one of my favorites. These films, like I said, I didn't really want to do a review thing. This is more like a retrospective, kind of going back on these films, talking about what I really do love about these films. Batman Returns is one of my favorites. The sequel, it's so good and so dark. I think Danny DeVito is like, oh man, he's unheralded, like underrated for sure. I know people use that term a lot, underrated and all that kind of stuff, but for real, his portrayal as Penguin was phenomenal. I think he did a really great job. And then Michelle Pfeiffer as Catwoman. We have Christopher Walken in that sequel as well. So for real, like all that whole cast in that second film is just a blast. And like some of those scenes, like they're just iconic. Like even the scene when they frame Batman for the murder of that was the Ice Princess girl and she falls on the tree. Like there's just some crazy stuff in this film that really stuck with me, especially at a young age. Like when I watched it, I still remember when I see that scene now, I remember watching it as a kid and like being like frightened and kind of freaked out for her. And like when he like lets the bats out of the umbrella and they just like fly around her and she falls off into the tree. So it's kind of wild. Like I said, this film, Batman Returns, is definitely a more darker edge, much more, as I said, stylized. But the substance is kind of missing in both these films. If you can say there's a negative, it's definitely the story route. With both of these films, I think they're kind of not really focused. They're kind of all over the place, and it's more like kind of just events happening in Gotham and certain things, you know what I mean? It doesn't feel like a cohesive type story, you know what I mean? But when you watch them, I watch it for nostalgia factor. I watch it because I love Batman, and yes, they necessarily might not be the best Batman films out there or anything like that. Batman Returns is still very high on my list. I think it's still in my top 4 if I remember correctly off the top of my head. It's still in my top 4 Batman films, Batman Returns, but they're not, like I said, viewed that highly, like, you know, the Dark Knight franchise or Justice League Snyder Cut or Batman v Superman, because people have seen those ones now and there's a lot more different elements when it comes to storytelling and stuff like that with comic book movies. But Batman and Batman Returns, you can't deny the fact that they're very influential films and really did spark the rise of comic films in the 90s going into the late 2000s, early 2000s. Like these films were kind of the ones that really did lay the blueprint down for what was going to happen when we got the X-Men films and the first Spider-Man films, you know, and all that kind of stuff. So thanks for sticking around with me, y'all. I hope you all excited for my other videos coming up after this one. We just did the Burton era, of course. Next, we're going to be on to the Schumacher era, which is a highly diverse era because some people say that's kind of like the death of comic book movies that we knew of at that time. So we're going to get on to that next. Thanks for sticking around with me, all, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a safe and happy day. Peace out.